the Marine Corps is pretty much entirely comprised of volunteers.
Yes.
And where were you living at the time that you joined?
Springfield, Massachusetts.
And why did you pick the Marine Corps?
I had a brother by the name of Earl Purnell Belton, and he was in the Marine Corps from 1952 to 1956. And I just always wanted to be like my brother.
So,
I have several brothers, but there was something just about him being in the Marine Corps that made him different and unique and stand out always in life.
So after high school, there's no question that you were going to join the Marine Corps?
Well, after high school, the Marine Corps wasn't on the horizon. I was working as a jet engine sheet metallist apprentice at Pratt & Whitney. And I had an exemption from being in the military because I was working for a defense company. But even though I was working for a defense company, it was impossible to get loans or anything like that because they say you're going to Vietnam anyhow at that age. And at that age, all my friends that I knew, who I grew up with, most of us, very few, with the exception of maybe 3 or 4 that I can count on my fingers, went to college. The rest of us, we were around, and they were gradually going in the military, so I knew it was inevitable that I would be in the military, and as such, I chose to go in the Marine Corps and be like my brother.
So what were your first days of service like?
Pure hell.
So at basic, did you go to Parris Island?
Parris Island, South Carolina. I went down there. That was my first time I ever went south. And I didn't have an idea of what it was like being black going south. But I had a traumatic experience riding on the bus going south, because at that time, I think it was the air traffic controllers strike was in and there were no aircraft. So I had to go on a bus. And when I got below the Mason-Dixie line, I really began to understand that there is clear distinctions between the way people of color are treated up north and the way they're treated down south.
So what year would it have been?
1966, August of 1966.
That's right in the middle of the civil rights.
Yes.
So, do you recall any stories, any anecdotes, any situations that occurred on the way?
Yeah, it was one of the first times that I ever saw white restrooms and black restrooms, and different snack bars for black and white. And one of the things that really tickled me, it was the first time I ever saw those Southern hot dogs that are red in color, and I didn't know what they were, and they said, those hot dogs. I'd never seen those. And I was on a bus, and it took about maybe a day and a half to get down there. And at one stop, I was sitting up front, and this woman got on the bus, and she got rather upset and angry about, you're not supposed to be sitting up here, and you need to move, and all this other kind of stuff. And there was a person of color who got on the bus, and he said, it's just easier for you to come on back here. And I moved to the back of the bus. But I didn't understand why. But I experienced that several other times.
So, did that kind of culture shock persist throughout boot camp training?
Boot camp training was an eye-opener because I ran into people of color, and I'm using a politically correct term, but back then we were black. I ran into blacks that were from down south, and when we talked, it was like we lived in different worlds. Like one of my friends' name was Judge Meadows, and I asked him, why would your mother call you Judge? And he said, my mother always wanted me to have respect. And there were people in my squadron or in boot camp that their name was Mr. And I had never heard of things like this.
So, have they internalized that racism?
Oh, they had a different perspective around how to deal with racism compared to how I dealt with it. And I was like a virgin around dealing with racism and racist behavior. It was a shocking experience.
Did you feel any of that racism from any of your instructors or officers at Parris Island?
Oh yeah. Sometimes they would even use racial slurs to motivate you. Like somebody used to call, they had a poem that I had to learn about something about Dr. Jabal Jones, and I'm from Frogmore, South Carolina, with the population of so many this and that and this and that, and I had learned some of those things when I had to sound off my name.
So how did you get through it?
I wasn't going to let them deter me from my dream of getting the gold globe and anchor, because my brother, I have several brothers older than me, 5 brothers older than me, and the thing that was interesting is my brother, who was the Marine, he said, "Oh, you're the baby of the family, you couldn't cut it." So there was a determination of proving that I could cut it to get the globe and anchor. And then also there was an internal anger that said, I'm gonna get through this.
Did he, had he advised you about
No.
any of this? Okay.
No, he just constantly told me, you couldn't do it.
So, do you remember any of your instructors?
I remember Sergeant Johnson. He was very hard on me. And then they had a Sergeant McCullum. We had good guy, bad guy syndrome. Sergeant Johnson was the bad guy. Sergeant McCullum was a better person.
So, did you have were any of your officers or drill instructors persons of color?
There may have been 1 or 2 on the island, but I never had a black person or a Hispanic person as a drill instructor while on Parris Island.
So once you graduated, completed basic training, boot camp, were, completely enlisted, Marine, while you were in the South, if you wore your uniform, would you still encounter the same kind of racism?
Well, it's important to understand that when I went in August, I stayed on Parris Island until early October. And then the month of October, I went from South Carolina to North Carolina, Camp Lejeune. And I stayed there until I came home for a couple weeks before I was sent to my my A school in Memphis, Tennessee.
So were you just compartmentalized?
Yeah, I didn't experience civilian life, military life with my uniform on until I left North Carolina and came home, and we were on a bus that took us into the Port Authority and didn't experience it there. But when I left Springfield, Massachusetts on a bus going to Memphis, Tennessee, there were quite a few experiences going south on a bus again.
Would you even be accosted wearing a uniform?
Wouldn't be accosted, but they clearly let you know that they didn't care for you whether you were in a uniform or not. In defense of your country didn't prevent people from exhibiting less than appropriate behavior towards you.
So in Camp Lejeune, what kind of advanced training did you do?
I went to ITR, Advanced Infantry Training, and we were there about 4 weeks and received specialized training. My training was just a hair different because I was considered what they call aviation guarantee, and I didn't know at that time that where I was going, there were very few people who looked like me that I would experience in the air wing, because it was considered, the MOSs were considered that you tested out good, that you had a solid skills, science, and enabled you to do more technical and technological things than people who went to ground pounders.
So So do you think any of this was predicated on your previous aviation experience at Pratt & Whitney?
I think a lot of it was predicated on a solid education that I received at technical high school, and plus the work that I did at Pratt & Whitney aircraft around dealing with sheet metal numbers, tolerances, being a master machinist, a number of things I think put me in a better position.
So where did you go for that specialized training?
For aviation,
Yes.
I went to Naval Air Training Technical Training Command in Memphis, Tennessee, but it wasn't really Memphis. It was a suburb called Millington.
And what did that training consist of?
That was my A school, and that's where I went, and I went through mechanical fundamentals, and then they had what you call your primary school of training for the type of aviation support you were going to be in, and I went through a hydraulics and pneumatics program.
And is there did you receive a universal aviation education there, or was it tailored towards specific?
It was focused on hydraulics that could be applied to any type of aircraft that you would have been assigned to. It was generic hydraulics that would have been appropriate for if you were working on a C-130 or if you were working on a F-8 Crusader.
How many people were in your class?
Probably maybe 35.
You said there were very few people.
I was only one.
What was that like?
Memphis was, the training and the education was challenging. It kept you busy, but Memphis was a beautiful place. And when Liberty would come, there was a section of Memphis that was considered out of bounds, but it was the only place that people of color went to. And I can remember when I first went to Memphis, there's a famous movie theater down there called the Orpheus. And I had my uniform on. It was one of the first times I went to Memphis, didn't know. And I went to the movie theater and went through the front door and sat down and watched the movie and looked all around. And in the movie theater, I didn't see anybody who looked like me. And I came out and I remembered that. And as I had been at Memphis for a while, I met a young lady and we went to a movie. And we went to the same movie theater, and I'm walking toward the front door with civilian clothes. No. And she said, no, don't go there. I said, but this is where the theater's at. She said, no, our entrance is on the side. So we went around to the side and went up almost 2-3 flights of steps, and way up in this super high balcony were all the people of color sitting watching the movie. This is 1966. And the Trailways bus station that I pulled into in 1966, my first trip to Memphis, when I got off the bus, they still had signs up, black restroom, blacks only, whites only signs.
After you completed your tour, did any of these things change while you were in service, or?
Which tour? In Vietnam?
Yes. Upon returning, had there been any point at the middle of the civil rights movement?
There were a number of things that had happened. There was the big demonstration that they had in Memphis, Tennessee, where the sanitation workers shut the city down. There were a number of riots that had taken place, the cities that had burned out. But it was very interesting because while I was in the military, we spent a lot of time talking about how it appeared that the military fought 2 wars at the same time. The United States was able to fight the war in Vietnam. At the same time, they appeared to almost fight the war of civil rights, because they made monumental movement in breaking down barriers for veterans, but at the same token, they emptied out the cities of black males through the draft, and you ran into a lot of people of color in the military, but you weren't in large units of people of color.
Do you think that was intentional?
In aviation, in most cases, there may have been out of 200, 250, we did good if we had 5 or 6 people of color in our outfits.
No.
I never saw a lot of blacks in outfits that I was with that were assigned to aviation.
Now, once you were in a combat zone, did the stress of battle or, the urgency of your duties, did that break down any racial barriers?
No. When you went to Vietnam, you began to know that you fought 2 wars in Vietnam. You fought the war of racism in Vietnam, and you fought the war that the United States was engaged in with North Vietnam. There were several instances in the Marine Corps back in those days, Camp Lejeune, Conoy Bay, where black Marines had gotten killed on the base because of racial disturbances. And it was so bad at that time. They had something that was called the All Marine Act, 1969, that talked about appropriate behaviors for blacks, because we were in the military, and there were things like, how long should an afro be? Can you use the black power salute? Can you wear towels around your necks? Because it was a time when blacks in Vietnam were militant, but we complied with the rules, but we were also black men. And while I was there, I met a journalist and spent a lot of time with a person by the name of Wallace Terry, who eventually created a tape called Guess Who's Coming Home, and a book called The Oral History on the Vietnam War called Bloods. And his book was the first book to capture what I would say the black veterans' experience in Vietnam. And in March of 1983, I went to the University of Massachusetts to see this black man that was coming to town to talk about Vietnam, and it just so happened that it was Wallace Terry. And when I went to they had like a special reception for him, and because we were part of a veterans group, we got invited to this. And I walked in the room, and I said, I know this guy. And they said, Belton, you think you know everybody? And I said, I do. And we exchanged names, because when I was in the military, I gave up what we call your normal name, which was a slave name, Thomas Belton, and I assumed this name in the military while I was in Vietnam, called Nrefu, which meant tall warrior.
Would you mind spelling that, please?
N-R-E-F-U, Nrefu, meaning tall warrior, because African names denote the characteristics of what you would encounter when you see the person. And Wallace and I talked, and one of my prized possessions that I'll share with you later is an autographed copy that he wrote in the book, talking about to one of the original Bloods in Vietnam, because we often used to have what we call rap discussions, where we would talk about racial tension in the military and how we were going to deal with it when we got back to the world. And matter of fact, we even had a special hut in Chulai that was called the Hakalu, which was the House of Blackness, that was known throughout Vietnam, that if you were traveling en route, a black person was always welcome at this hut.
Would you mind spelling that, please?
Oh, I've got it in a book. I'm not really good at spelling it, but I'll get the exact spelling for you.
Thank you. So, well, when you arrived in country, where did you fly into?
We flew into Da Nang, Mag 11, August, I want to say we left the United States August 28th, so we must have got there about August 29th, August 30th.
And did you immediately begin your duties of aircraft servicing?
Before we went in country, We stopped like in Okinawa, and they gave us our weapons and what gear we were required, because they said we could potentially be going into a hot airfield, which was Da Nang, that was always under rocket attack. So I landed at night, and we had to scamper, and we stayed in a temporary billeting. And I remember the first night I was so frightened. I slept with my M14 on the chest, and I saw things in the room that I thought were people. It was just a frightening experience, first time in country, and I was in a hut by myself.
Why were you alone?
Well, it just so happened the way things broke out and where we went to, I was just there by myself.
So did you see any combat while you were in country?
Yes. Not a lion's share of combat, but after our aircraft were unable to sustain operability because they couldn't supply the parts, and they cannibalized so many of the parts on the aircraft to get other aircraft up. Some of the things that they did was I was sent to what they called defense platoon duty, and that was where you guarded the perimeter at night, and that is where I experienced the bulk of my combat when people came or the enemy tried to probe the line and gain access to the base. We were out there on the outer perimeter to protect the base.
It sounds like you had a diversity of assignments while you were at Da Nang.
Oh, yes.
Were there many casualties in your unit?
There was one casualty that I can remember, because in my cruise book, I think there was one casualty that was enlisted and one that was commissioned, if I correctly remember what's in the cruise book.
So what would the day-to-day responsibilities be like?
When I was assigned to the squadron, I was on what they call the 6 to 6 shift. We worked 12 hours. So I would go in at 6 in the evening and work till 6 in the morning. And our primary responsibilities were to launch and recover aircraft, repair aircraft that have any form of damage to them, load ordnance, and the same duties that you would do in a squadron stateside were similar to what you would do in Vietnam. The only difference was you were doing it in a combat situation.
Were most of the maintenance operations required due to hostile fire, or just like
regular PM, wear and tear on a bird? We would do preventative maintenance, dropping engines, checking them out, putting them back up. Damage to the structural damage was more frequent to the aircraft because of ground fire or even secondary explosions from ordnance that might put holes in the aircraft. We'd have to patch them back up and send them back out. But we had our squadron, VMFA 334, was the first F4J squadron that went in country, and as such, they had other Phantom squadrons in country, in theater, but they weren't F4Js, so not all the parts were interchangeable. Therefore, we ran out of parts, and at one time we might have had less than 30 or 40% of our squadron operational.
So the F4J would have been the most advanced version
Yes.
at the time?
Yes.
Did the squadron fly any other types of aircraft?
Well, when I first joined the squadron in '67, we had F-8 Crusaders, the gunfighters. And then we went to F-4Js. And to the best of my knowledge, most of the squadron remained with F-4Js. And that's what they flew.
So how many hours of maintenance would they require after every sortie?
Oh, it was continuous. We would always PM the birds because they would always have to be ready for emergency sorties. We provided air support to the B-52s that flew up to Haiphong Harbor and dropped ordnance there. We provided close air support to ground troops, and we also patrolled the perimeters looking for NVA movement. So our aircraft were required on a 24/7 basis. So it was constant, keep the work up on the planes, have them ready at a moment's notice to be launched.
Sounds like a stressful position.
Oh, yeah.
How did you deal with that stress?
The desire to want to get home. The desire to want to come home and get back to the States.
So, would you mind telling me about a couple of your most memorable experiences?
Good ones or bad ones?
Your discretion.
September 25th or 28th, somewhere like that, was memorable. I was working on an aircraft at night, had lights on, and I was working inside of the in-flight refueling probe, and the VC and NVA always used to like to launch rockets at night. And they always used to tell you, if you hear the rocket go off, the explosion, you're okay. It's the ones that you don't hear. And I woke up with damage to my face and several broken ribs and some contusions and cuts from a rocket explosion where a rocket exploded in a revetment by the aircraft, and the concussion or the explosion moved the aircraft, shattered stuff, threw me all over the place. So that was something. When I woke up, I said, "Well, geez, I'm like Forrest Gump. I got wounded. I'm gonna go home." But it didn't happen for Marines. Shortly, I was in sick bay a little while, and after that, they put me in what they call a casual company, where you're not up to full speed, but there's things that you can do. And memorable experience, for close to 90 days, I had what you call base compound duty. So I burnt human waste and extracted human urine from the urinals that were there to make sure the base stayed sanitary and everything like that. And that was considered good duty because it was good duty. I didn't have to be out there on the airfield. And it was like you started in the morning, like 6 in the morning, and you're done at sometime in the afternoon, but it wasn't as long of a day. And they could always tell when Belton was on the job, because it's just like in the movie Platoon. You would see him stir that pot up, pour the diesel fuel in there, put some toilet paper, light it up, and you would see it like the Indian frontier, all this black smoke coming up. Belton was on the job. Memorable experience. We had a vehicle that was called the pumper pisser, and I used to have to suck out all the human urine that was put in here, because they would have like a little trough and it would go into these 55-gallon barrels, and you had to go around and suck that out like every 2-3 days. And the person who I took the job from told me, remember, when you go to dispose of this and you go to the beach, take the sand and throw it up in the air and then let it out. And I thought that, and the first time I did it, I went to the beach and I took some sand and I threw it up in the air, and I didn't pay no attention to it, and I had this big 3-inch hose, and I turned on the hose and it shot straight out, and in a split second I saw this big lime green cloud come back to me, and just I was just covered in everything. And what that person was telling me to do was to make sure that you know which way the wind is blowing before you cut that stuff loose. Those were some memorable experiences. It was bad duty, but it was good duty.
See, I couldn't help but notice the Purple Heart in the corner.
Yes.
Was that attributed to the rocket attack?
Yes.
So,
But that in itself has a story, because I never got my Purple Heart until about 28 years after I came home from Vietnam, because no one put me in it for it because of the injuries I sustained. And I talked to some people and they looked at my service record and they said, you should have got a Purple Heart. So
On your DD 214, did it denote it?
no, it didn't denote a Purple Heart, because there were some instances where everybody didn't get treated the same way when it came to medals, honors, and things. And I didn't get mine until about 28 years later. So that my Purple Heart came in a brown bag and left on my porch. And there was no big ceremony. There was no officer shaking my hand. There was no pinning of the medal. It was like they just ushered my medal in a brown bag. And I still remember that. Got it in February. I think it was February of 1993 I got that.
Did you ever receive a welcome home?
No.
And would you care to describe how that feels?
When I came back, the war was not fashionable, and Americans made sure that they knew that they didn't particularly care for your participation in the war. When I came back home from Vietnam, I landed in Boston, and there were people in Copley Square that I had to come through that really just made your coming home not decent. It wasn't racial, it was just against the war. And I came home. I got stationed at headquarters Marine Corps Squadron in Norfolk, Virginia. I did about a year there, but when I came out of the military, I got back with some of my other friends, and we shared a common bond that we talked about how difficult it was assimilating back into the workplace, how difficult it was talking to people, how nobody really wanted to hear what we had to say. And if you started to talk to them, they'd say, oh, no, don't tell me no more. So it was several years before a group of us came together and realized that we had some same problems. And we created an organization that was chartered in 1978 or 1979 called the Winchester Square Vietnam Era Veterans. And since that time, we have remained in existence, and we have lobbied for veterans' rights. We played a major role in helping to move the issues of how veterans get their PTSD claims through. We've been a major force in the state of Massachusetts with helping to make the state and the citizens of the state of Massachusetts more aware of what they should never do to another group of veterans that go off to fight in harm's way.
Do you ever feel that you suffer from post-traumatic stress?
Oh, I'm service connected for that. Matter of fact, I was on one of the first committees that explored the difference between how blacks respond to PTSD, or I should say non-minorities respond to PTSD versus minorities, because the standard that they were using was all based on white veterans, and a lot of black veterans didn't respond the same way. And there's different physiological things that happen to black veterans when they become stressful that don't happen to white veterans. And at that time they were using the white veteran standard, so there would be some things that would indicate like, well, you blacks don't fit into how it's supposed to be. And they began to recognize that there's a difference between the way blacks and people of color handle post-traumatic stress versus non-minorities. Not a major distinction, but one of the ones that I always remember that they brought to the forefront is we used to, while I was going through this prototype program, they were trying to sense how dry my palms got when I got stressed, or how wet, like sweaty palms. A lot of white veterans that were experiencing PTSD, when they got really stressful, they got wet, sweaty palms. What's so interesting is people of color, their palms get dry and their skin becomes dry and ashy, and it's a difference that they began to at least explore and say that maybe there's a difference between how black veterans respond to PTSD than white veterans. And it's also important to understand that PTSD that we experienced, part of it also had to do with the racism that we experienced in Vietnam that non-minorities didn't experience. It's a terrible thing to be on a base and know that there's the enemy out there, but you actually have white veterans that drew lines and just wanted. There were numerous documented cases of where gunfights, firefights took place on the base. Frags. The fragging is when you take and throw a grenade into somebody's head. But it wasn't commonplace, but it did happen. Nobody talks about that. Nobody talks about the fear of worrying about, is somebody going to frag your hut that you're staying in that night because you're black, or because you tend to be a person of color that's outspoken, that speaks up for what they believe in.
Did you ever feel conflicted in country about
Yes, I did.
Fulfilling
Yes.
the duties of a racist state?
It made me very aware of things that I was unaware of, or I may have been aware of, but was afraid to articulate for fear of reprisal of being in the military. Because we would talk about, things like the riots that were going on in the cities, and what would you do if they assign your units to go back and clean up some riot disturbances. And there was a person that I met in the military, and I'll show you the book so you can get the correct spelling, but his name was Ron Karinga, and his name is Malik Karinga, who was an individual who created the organization called US, and he was the individual who played a major role in bringing about what is considered Kwanzaa, the black holiday. And I brought in some stuff that I just wanted to share with you so you could get an idea of all the different things that were going on at the same time the war was going on. Another interesting component that we found out that played some critical roles in my life is, after the military had exhausted people from the draft, and there were no more people that they could draft, as quiet as it's kept, there was a project called Project 100,000. And they took 100,000 veterans who couldn't pass the entry-level test to get in the military. Primarily low-educated white people, uneducated black people, and brought them into the military.
What year was this event?
I think this was in the late 80s, early 90s. Late 80s, let me back up. Late 1989, 1969 era, as the war was beginning to ramp up.
So, what effect would that have had on
Well,
the military in the country?
I had a person in my outfit that I ran into who caused some problems for us because the individual was unable to read what was on the ammunition boxes. And there's M16 and M14 ammo. And when we were on defense platoon, either he wasn't conscious of it, but I think it was, when we even talked about it, the individual couldn't differentiate the ammo based on the lettering on the boxes. And that almost cost us our lives while we were there. And I can remember a distinct event that took place one night on Defense Platoon, where I said, you know, if I get back to the country, I'm gonna always try to make sure that literacy changes in the world, because you don't value your education or what you've been taught until you see the real relevance of it in a life and death situation.
So, when you were on perimeter duty, were you predominantly issued an M16 or an M14?
M16.
Okay.
But when we got out there, we had some old-fashioned M14 ammo that didn't go with weapons.
They take a different route?
Yeah, it takes a different route, entirely different. And that was a night that we got probed real hard, and we knew that we were going to engage the enemy that night, and if we would have had a serious firefight, ammunition would have been exhausted real quick.
So all you had on you was what you carried there on your person?
What I carried. And I was always prepared. I carried so much ammo on me, if I took a direct hit, I would probably look like a nuclear explosion. But I would have always wanted to be prepared. I humped a lot of ammo when I went on defense platoon. Some of my friends in the bush that were boonie masters had told me, make sure you carry enough bandoliers. Better that you hump it than not have it. And although I wasn't a grunt, they gave me good information to survive, and I made sure I paid close attention to that.
Worth its weight in blood or gold?
Yes, it's worth its weight in lead. Because like they say, it's really true. It's not the number of rounds that are fired in war that makes the difference. It's the number of confirmed kills.
So you always hear these accolades of the Marine Corps. No matter what their MOS, they're a rifleman first.
That is absolutely true. Do not believe that is just false hearsay. We don't even have medical professionals in the Marine Corps. Everyone is a basic 0311, and when all MOSs fail, you revert back to a 0311. That is absolutely true.
And so no matter what, pretty much anybody could be pulled off.
That's
Put
right.
on the line.
You are trained when all else fails. You are to pick up a weapon, and you are to be a basic infantry rifleman, commonly called a grunt, 0311.
So what, do you recall what weapons you were trained on or qualified on? through the Marine Corps?
I was qualified on the M14 is what I shot in Paris Island. We did other rifle training during different locations on the M16. When I went to ITR, weapons that I fired there were the M60, the 45, we had an M1, we had the M1 carbine, different weapons.
Did you have one that you preferred over the other in the country?
45. I wasn't supposed to have a 45, but I swapped some stuff with different people on the base, and I had a 45 automatic 911, and I carried that as well as my M16.
Once you received the field promotion to sergeant, would you be able to draw one from supply? Or?
No, because we were still aviation, and we weren't really perceived as frontline ground troops that were engaging the enemy every day. So my weapon still was the M16, but I still had a 45 automatic. Kept that.
Did you ever have to use it?
I used it a couple times, but not under legitimate conditions. Sometimes you may have been out fraternizing with the general public where you weren't supposed to be at, and you didn't take your M14, but you had a 45, and yeah, I had to crank some rounds. Yes.
So, how did you stay in touch with your family while you were in Vietnam?
I wrote home a lot. I didn't have a girlfriend in Vietnam, so it was like my family that kept me going. I was dating a young lady when I was before I went in the Marine Corps, and her father told me that she was going to marry a doctor and everything like that, and he in essence didn't feel that I was good company for his daughter. But as interesting as it was, when I came back from Vietnam, I was stationed in Norfolk, Virginia, and I was at a Marine Corps event at Hampton Institution, which is now called Hampton University, and she was going to school there, so we hooked back up again. Father wasn't around to dictate what was happening. I took her to a Marine Corps ball in, I want to say it was 1969. Right after I came back, we went to a Marine Corps ball event, and it was nice.
Small world.
Yes, it is.
So, now I suppose some questions about the day-to-day life in country. What was the food like?
Some days we had good meals. Some days we had bad meals.
Any sea rations? Or?
Yes. But I was like a Comshaw artist. I could get some things, and I would get stuff from out of the mess hall, and we would cook some stuff back around our hooch or hut sometimes because the food just wasn't good. And we'd mix stuff up in hot sauce, Tabasco sauce, like when you had the Welcome Home Vietnam Veterans thing in the little bag, there was Tabasco sauce and
standard with that every sea ration.
It didn't come standard with the sea rations. We had it sent to us, and that was stuff that would make food taste better. And what was his name? Pat Daly.
Yep.
Didn't seem to understand or didn't know what that was about, so I explained that to him. Because officers versus enlisted, the food was entirely different. I always kept sea rations around in case there weren't meals on the base, because you had to eat.
So sometimes the sea rations we preferred to.
Yeah, sometimes there were certain sea rations like limers, and we used to have certain terms for it, but we call limers and hams, but we got to keep this video clean, so we'll eliminate that name. And there was like beef steak, and there were peaches. We had the Vienna sausages. There were different things that you really liked. I just liked the beef steak and the hammers and limes, and the peaches were just wonderful. And we had this big chunk of hard chocolate that you could hit it with a brick, and you had to hit it 2-3 times to crack it, but it made good hot chocolate if you put it in water and let it dissolve and heat it up. But yeah, that.
Did you feel like you had plenty of supplies? Ammunition?
We had plenty of supplies for personal protection and to take care of yourself. We didn't have the appropriate support to maintain the aircraft as a primary weapon against the enemy.
Now, did the Air Force fly F-4Js at the same time?
The Air Force flew a different version of the Phantom, but it wasn't a F-4J.
So there wouldn't be any.
There wasn't interchange. The brakes might have been interchangeable, or some of the components, but in most cases there were other squadrons that had Phantoms that we couldn't interchange the parts within our Marine Air Group.
And now I always ask Marines, because you see in photographs, Marines wearing personal protective equipment, like flak jackets, helmets.
Yes.
So much more often than you see pictures of Army enlisted men or officers in the field wearing personal protection. is that something that was just ingrained to you in training, or was there more?
Well, I think that some of the reasons you see some of that stuff is there were Marines that were spending a horrific number of days in country. You know, we didn't go to country, be in country for 365 days. For some reason, they thought the Marines had to be elite. So we did 13 months, 395 days. So personal protection didn't guarantee that you would survive, but personal protection offered you an additional ounce of prevention, because any Marine would tell you that if it's your time to go, don't make no difference what you got on. Your number's up. Me, I kept my flak jacket close to me and my steel pot. I really wanted to come back home.
Was there anything special you did for good luck in these 13 months?
Kept God close to me. Matter of fact, I discovered a new relationship with God overseas.
No atheists in the hospitals?
No. If they was there, they definitely weren't identifying at that time.
So how did you entertain yourself while you were overseas?
Oh, I had stereo equipment, radios. I had a radio that had like cassettes in it, and we would get cassettes from home, hear music, and some of the fellas overseas had massive stereo systems like Sansui and Akai and amplifiers and speakers, and you could go to different areas and you could hear music from back home, and like in the hut that I was with a fellow who was from Seattle, Washington, and all he played was Johnny Cash. And I learned to appreciate country and western music because that's all he played in the hut. Johnny Cash, Folsom Prison, Boy Named Sue.
Did you ever see any entertainers while you were in country?
Yes, there was a group that came in. I saw some folks. I saw Rosie Greer at Freedom Hill in Da Nang. And there was a group called the Clusters. They were people that were Filipinos, and they were real dark-skinned Filipinos with big afros, and they looked black, and they sang soul music, and oh, it was just wonderful when we saw them. Made you think about what's going on back in the world and how you want to get back so bad.
Did you ever get any leave home for that 13 months?
No. No.
And were you able to travel anywhere else in the country while you were in service?
I happened to know a friend that lived in the same house. We grew up in a Boston duplex. He was up by the DMZ, up by Da Nang and Quang Tri and Phu Bai, and I did what they call a in-country R&R. They give you a couple days off, and I went up there to go see him. And he was really close to the DMZ to the extent that even that night, that day that I got there that night, we were sitting in the hut talking, and we're just shaking because you could feel the B-52 airstrikes up at the DMZ. I saw Spooky and Puff out there writing their red lines, both in Da Nang and Chu Lai. But when you left what we consider like a Marine Air Group, a MAG, and got into different locations, support bases and forward observation base, the war took on different dimensions. And when I went to go visit him, it was a different experience. And I told him, I said, I'll be leaving tomorrow.
You must have been a good friend to go up to the DMZ to see.
Yes, he was. Matter of fact, we've been lifelong friends, and that has put us in a special connection together.
Glad to hear you made it home.
Yes, both of us got back.
Now, do you recall any particularly humorous or unusual event that occurred to you? Maybe even the absurd?
Oh, yeah.
You went to service? All right.
This one happened when I came back home from Vietnam. I was a sergeant, and I was stationed at Norfolk, Virginia, headquarters Marine Corps Squadron, and I had a room that I was in by myself, and there was an extra bed. There were supposed to be 2 people in there. And the squadron that I was in, there was a lot of racial tension. And I mean, I was one of few people of color always in the outfits I was in. And I came into my room and I had a key for it one day, and I noticed this mattress was all, the pillow was all disturbed. And I said, what's this? And I whipped it open, and there was a 45 automatic, brand new, in the Cosmoline, the wraps, 3 or 4 magazines. And I said, oh my goodness, these people are trying to set me up. And I was paranoid about that, so I grabbed all that stuff and went back and reported to my first sergeant and whipped it out of the bag, and he thought I was going to shoot somebody. But I told him, you're not going to set me up like this. This is not mine. I don't know how this got into my room, and I'm bringing you this back because you're not going to say that I stole this weapon. And one of the fellows in my outfit, a fellow by the name, I think his name was G.G. Hunt or something like that. He came up and said, man, you're a real asshole, Belton. I said, what? He said, man, they were doing locker inspections in my room, so I just hid it in your room. And I said, well, I didn't know that. I said, they've been burning brothers left and right, and you come in and you find a gun in your room, and I'm just supposed to say, oh, yeah, I'll just keep it here. No. And he was so upset because I don't know how he had come about it, whether it was legal or brought it back from Vietnam, but I knew it wasn't mine, and I knew that they were looking for a number of things to always burn a brother by. And
would that be dishonorable?
That would be a court-martial offense, to be in possession of a military weapon that could possibly have been stolen or considered contraband, and you're in possession of it? No, not me. I came out of the Marine Corps with good conduct medal. Matter of fact, I made corporal E4 in I think it was either 12 or 13 months after being Marine Corps. I made PFC coming out of boot camp. I made Lance Corporal when I got to my first duty station, and shortly thereafter I made Corporal. So when I went overseas, I was a Corporal, and I got a meritorious combat promotion overseas, so I did good rank.
I was going to ask you about that, John. Would you care to describe the circumstances surrounding your combat promotion to sergeant?
We were deploying to a new base, and I was attached to a forward echelon group that were to prepare the new base location for the transfer of aircraft, and I came in there, and instead of just being a driver, I did whatever I had to do and help support, and I was recognized for it, and the rank sergeant in the Marine Corps is a unique rank. You're a non-commissioned officer, but to be a sergeant in the Marine Corps and make it in less than 3 years, thereabouts, that in those days, that was record-breaking. And to be black and to make a sergeant, that you had to be good, and I was.
Even a corporal in the Marine Corps is higher than a corporal in the Army, right?
Yes, because see, in the Marine Corps, you have what they call hard rank. In the Army, you have corporal and you have spec ranks. So our sergeant and our corporal, compared to the Army, always had greater responsibilities than the Army rank. A little rivalry, but Marine Corps rank was special.
So, what other medals and achievements did you win while you were in the Marine Corps? I think there's about 14 or 15. I have a combat action ribbon, Purple Heart, a Vietnamese Cross of Gallantry, some other medals that I can't always remember the names on, but the National Defense. They're on
They're on my DD-214 and my DD-215.
Now, what did you think of your officers and fellow soldiers while you were in the service?
Officers I had minimal contact with. Minimal contact. I had some very good friends that were in the Marine Corps. One of my friends that I was real close with, a fellow by the name of John Tessier. Tell you a little story about him. Can I tell a story about him? Got time? It was monsoon season, and I'd washed a pair of socks. You know, I said we had worked 12 hours a day. And Tessier was in the hut, and I'd washed a pair of socks, had them hanging up in the hut. And it was about 3, 4, 5 days had gone by, and with the weather as damp as it was, things didn't dry quick. And then there was this issue about the socks. And I told Tessier, I said, you know, I hung these socks days ago, and there was this, it wasn't good. And Tessier and I got into an altercation because Tessier had uttered that word that you just didn't utter. He called me a nigger in Vietnam, and that just, we just had a real big bang up, knock up fight like John Wayne through the walls down, and I was beating on him, and even though he was beat, blood come out of his mouth, he still was calling me a nigger. And I remember that event, but what really seals that event in my memory is that he contacted me some years later in around 1993 and wanted to know if this was the same Tom Belton that was in VMFA 334. And I said, yeah. And then he told me who he was, and I remembered him, but I remembered the fight more. I asked him how he had been doing, and he said, oh, I was just got out of the penitentiary for manslaughter, and, you know, I was in, and then he said he wanted to meet me, and he told me he just went to jail for manslaughter. So I told him, I said, okay. And I had always carried a buck knife in Vietnam, and I never forget. I told my wife, I said, I'm gonna go see this guy. And I put it on my waist and had my shirt down. And I had seen programs about veterans who hadn't seen veterans that would meet one another and they would hug and embrace. And I didn't think this was going to happen. And we met right here in Springfield down by the bus station. His car was parked one way, my car was parked another way, because he had taken his girlfriend and her daughter to a track meet in upstate New York, and he stopped on the way back. And I got out the car and I walked toward him, and I just got this overwhelming sensation that I can't explain, and I just got real teary-eyed, and we both hugged and kissed in the middle of the street. And I didn't think I would have acted like that. And we went to McDonald's in the North End, and we talked, and what she wanted to know was, and what John wanted to know was, what precipitated the fight? And I said, you don't remember? And we talked, and after it appeared that it was a safe space, I called my wife and told her where I was at, and told her, come on down, I want you to meet somebody from Vietnam. And while we talked, I talked about how you called me a nigger, John. And you know that was a no-no in Vietnam. And we had this fight, and I asked John why it was so important. And John said something about when he had done time in this Department of Corrections Institute, when they put him in this predominantly black cell block, they told him, you know, like, this is our block, we run this, and you do what we say, or we'll turn you out, and we'll give you the ass whipping of your life. And John was a little cocky individual, and he laughed at him. They jacked him up, and they wanted to know what John was laughing at, because he said, you know, you ain't giving me the ass whipping of my life. And he said, you'd have to be second compared to the one I got in Vietnam. And we laughed about that, and he said that relationship helped him do good time with the cell block, because he explained what actually happened. And then periodically I would see John when he would come up here to the PTSD ward in Northampton. But I went online maybe 3 years ago to check and see on the status of members in the squadron, and he's passed away. And John was a special person. He was the only person I had run into from Vietnam other than Pat Daly, who was an officer.
Do you attend any squadron reunions?
No, I've never gone to one. I've wanted to go. Matter of fact, I was in there looking at this squadron reunion that's coming up in November in San Diego, and I ran into some stuff, names, and there was another person in there from Wisconsin. He used to live in Muskego, Wisconsin. His name is Tim Addis. And I called the number just on a fluke to see if this was the same guy. And I called him, and he came to the phone, and he sounded like he either just woke up or he was in his juice or something like that. And we talked over the phone, and I asked him, was he in Squadron VMFA 334, and we talked and blah, blah, blah. And I told him I was in the same squadron, and then he shared with me how, you know, he wouldn't probably go to the squadron party because he came out with a less than honorable discharge, and it's just plagued him, and he wouldn't feel comfortable with that. But we talked, and he asked me, did I have any stuff of the squadron, because he'd been married twice. In his first marriage, his wife had thrown all his stuff out. So I told him, I said, I got stuff, I got pictures of it, and I sent this stuff to him, and I thought I sent it to the right address, but I sent it to the wrong address. So I kept on calling him, did you get it? Did you get this? Did you get this? And he said no. And as we talked, we were talking, and I thought he knew who I was, but he didn't. And I was saying, and we were talking, and he was saying, well, you know, I didn't have that many friends, but I used to run with a black fella in Vietnam, in stateside, by the name of, I don't know, he was Tall Tom or something, Beldinger, Malden or Bolton or something like that. And I said, Timmy, that's me. We've been talking, that's me. And then he said something over the phone that I had to laugh for days. He says, you mean you're black? And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, you talk and you sound white. So I told him I would send him another batch of photos of them. And I had the right address, and I sent him the photos. And that was, we laugh and joke about that. And I said, and he said, you look like the fellow that I knew back then. And I've been trying to talk him into going, and he's still sort of reluctant. And I said, it's not about do you have good paperwork. It's about us going back to see if there's any folks there we knew. And I'm trying to talk him into going and seeing. Now, Pat has said he's going to go, but I wouldn't feel comfortable with Pat because he's an officer. Even though we're all civilians now, that those lines of demarcation were still there. That's how come when I saw the squadron, I have always supported it and paid for a DVD. And when I would see it, you could tell the people in there were officers. And, you know.
There's still that
yeah,
click.
Yeah, that click.
So, did you ever join any veterans organizations?
Yes, as I said, we created the Winchester Square Vietnam Era Veterans, and I've been a member of that since 1978, 1979.
Now, do you recall the day your service ended?
August 18th, 1970.
And how did you feel?
They had these discussions about, do you want to stay in? And my mother was not well. So we used to have this expression, I thought about it, I laughed about it, I forgot about it, I'm going home. And the young lady that her father didn't want me to date, that I had started to talk to in Norfolk, Virginia, she picked me up at the airport. So it was nice. It was nice. I came back. I didn't have nobody meet me at the airport. I came back home, and took my stuff off and probably went back to work at Pratt & Whitney in about 2 weeks. And that was a whole new experience. I just wasn't ready for that. I just couldn't have people talking to me any kind of way. And Pratt & Whitney, when I went there in the early 60s, I went in there at a labor grade 5, and that was considered a outstanding labor grade to be in, a well-paid labor grade. And there were blacks that were down there that were wondering, how would I get that job? And there weren't that many blacks in management, but shortly after, the Department of Labor came in there and sued Pratt & Whitney and told them they have to start hiring blacks and stuff like that. But by the time that happened, I had gotten so disenfranchised with Pratt & Whitney in this apprenticeship program that was designed for like future management folks. But I didn't know that. It was a 6,000 hour apprenticeship program. I had almost completed 5,700 hours before I packed it in, and I just didn't like it because I just couldn't handle some of the things they wanted to say and deal with. So I came back to Springfield and I got some job that I worked in and stuff like that. And then some of the folks that were in some of the menial jobs that were down there, they got put into supervisors and management positions. And they retired as supervisors or managers from Pratt & Whitney. And they always tell me, Tom, if you would have stayed down there, you would have been like a general foreman. You could have done anything because you were really sharp. But if I would have stayed at Pratt, I probably would have never gotten an opportunity to do some of the other things in life. Because it's an hour ride down, a 9-hour day, an hour back. That's 11 hours. Put sleep time in there. There's not a lot of time left in your life. So when I left Pratt & Whitney, I pursued other ventures.
Did you ever use the GI Bill for further education?
Yes, I did. I went to school and I got my GI benefits, and I didn't know nothing about college. My brother had told me when I was a kid, just go to Western New England, tell them you want to go to college. And I didn't think it was like that. So when I came out of school, they said you could get paid extra money for going to junior college. So I went to junior college and I didn't know nothing about no degree. And one day they called me in there and they said, Mr. Belton, you have to leave the campus. I said, why? They said, you have 135 credits. That's enough for 2 degrees. So I left STCC. I got a degree in 77. I got one in 78. I left there. I went to American International College. I got a Bachelor's of Art at American International College. And the longer I stayed in school, the easier it seemed. So I went off and I got my master's. I got a master's in Human Relations and Community Affairs. And then I went back and I got what you call a CAG, a Certificate in Advanced Graduate Studies. Then I took a brief break, but then I got laid off from digital in the early 90s. So then I went back to school to get a master's in education, and I got a CAG in counseling and therapy or something like that. So I have 4 graduate degrees, a BA and 2 associates. So I always tell my children, I said, I did this with all the problems that I have. There's no excuses for you saying you can't complete or go to school. And I'm proud to say I have 3 children. 2 of them have graduated from college. One needs to finish some credits, but he's been very successful with a very good business in Memphis, Tennessee. So I'm proud of him, and he'll probably finish that one day.
So how did you find yourself here?
When I got laid off from digital, March 26th, 1993, I took the summer off and I went to go see a friend of mine that was a family friend by the name of Frank Ballooney. And he told me, he said, Tom, you would be like a good person to work for the city. You need to get in touch with this guy by the name of Joe Doherty. And I tried to find Joe Doherty, sent letters, nobody called me back. And it's so strange because to deal with the stress of being laid off, I used to go to the gym every day and work out in the evening. And there was this little guy, little ponytail, little ring in his ear, and I would see him over there working, and he just was doing some things wrong. And we started a conversation, and we started working together, and I was like his little personal trainer, showing him some things. And then one day he said to me at night, he said, "Can you come down here at lunchtime?" I said, "Oh no, my days are spent looking for employment." And I said, because I've been trying to locate this guy, Joe Doherty, at the city of Springfield. I just can't get a call back. He says, "Oh, I can help you with that." I said, "Oh yeah," because I said, Frank Gallooni told me I should try to get in touch with him. And as it turned out, this guy that I was working with and exercising with was Joe Doherty. And he gave me my opportunity with the city. And I came here in August 28, 1993, because I took the summer off. When I got laid off, I intended not to go back to work until after the summer was over. And I've been here since August 28, 1993. So I'm coming up on almost 20 years or so.
Now, did your military experiences influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
It influenced both. It made me value freedom more, and the price that freedom costs. Freedom is not free. Someone always has to stand on line to protect the freedom. It also made me aware of the social issues around race and discrimination, and not everybody is treated equal, and that there's got to be some people who stand up and take a position and say that this is wrong and you need to fix it. And as a result of some of the diversity training that I did in the Marine Corps, helping with that, I found myself in a unique position. Probably 1997, I designed a diversity program for the city of Springfield that I rolled out, and we trained all the employees, because the city of Springfield was experiencing some issues around racism or valuing differences. A softer way of talking about racism is to say valuing differences. That's a politically correct term. When you talk about racism, it sort of shuts people down. So a lot of people talk about valuing differences. And I talked about valuing differences, but the real work that needed to be done was to talk about racism, and that never really got done. So that's something that still should be done, but hasn't been done. Because there are issues, not only in this city, but across the United States, how we're dealing with people and dealing with differences. And as the economy gets bad, you'll notice that there's always a rise in racial issues when economic conditions get bad, because it's always like, who are we going to blame it on? You know, this time I heard so much about the immigrants, the illegal aliens. It's all their fault, you know, taking American jobs. And a lot of those jobs that those folks take that come across the border, Americans wouldn't take anyhow. So the issue of diversity and valuing differences, it's an intricate fabric of the American way of life, and you got to know how to weave in that carpet to really survive.
So is there anything you'd like to add that you haven't covered in this interview?
I think it's important to go back and just touch on something. In November of 2011, it's noteworthy to note that President Obama put together some legislation to award the original Montford Point Marines that had went through there from 1942 to 1949, the ones that were subjected to this unique racism as the first black Marines, but they were in segregated units, and they've been recognized and are going to receive the Congressional Gold Medal. I have a cousin who is one of 5 Marines left in New Jersey that was in that, and I'm just so proud of him, and I'm trying to figure out how I could get there to the White House. But the guidelines are that it has to be a spouse or a blood relative. So I know I probably won't get there, but I'd love to be there with my camera to take pictures of my cousin getting the award from the Marine Corps. And my brothers have all served in the military. My brother Duke Belton was an individual that I tried to model my life after, and he's one of the few individuals in Springfield that has a monument out here. And he worked at the courthouse, and he was a boxing coach, and he was viewed very highly in the Springfield community. And I'm very proud of what he did and the legacy of what he did. And so we try to keep that alive. I try to be a good Belton. And my mother raised all of us single parent, and times were different, but it's so important to recognize those people who have gone ahead of you and open up the doors and blaze the trails, because today a lot of children don't know the sacrifices that people made before them to make it easy for them to be out there Facebooking and hollering and screaming, making rap music, wearing their clothes any way they want to. It's a shame that the stories aren't being told, but I think this is a great piece of work that you're doing, because this story can be repeated and shared, and people can read this. Even though people don't read books, they want to put it on a tablet, it's still something that we can save for posterity. So I want to thank you for the opportunity for me to tell my story and share it with you.
On behalf of the Veterans History Project and the Library of Congress, I want to say thank you, Mr. Belton, for your service.